welcome everybody to Office Hours. We'll ask that you keep yourself muted while our guests are talking a little bit about the topic today, and then you're welcome to unmute yourself to ask questions and that kind of thing. And if you have any questions that you want not to forget, you can always use the chat box, little chat buttons down in your controls, and you can always use that to jot down a question or a resource or, whatever you want to add to the meeting. And we'll get going. And John, if you just want to let me know when you want to play the little video, and I'll share my screen and play that. All right. So Eric, do you want to talk a little bit about Moravian music?
Well, sure. So it's interesting because the way we got into video is actually through lectures, which are they do have some music, but they're mostly spoken. So we've been recording lectures for maybe nearly 10 years or so, and had always paid a professional to come in. We had been using Jason Kubicki with Signal Company, and about 2 years ago he had an opportunity to sell us one of his cameras. And he said, wouldn't it be cool if you could record your own lectures and not have to pay me to come in every month to do that? So we did that. We invested in a camera. We invested in an iMac, and we're using Final Cut Pro, which is an Apple product, which is very nice. We have a Panasonic P2 HD camera. And so it's been a steep learning curve over the last year or so to handle the editing, trying to get the sound levels right, the light levels right, incorporating slides and graphics into those lectures, that kind of thing, and to add the audio tracks, after the fact. Put those into the videos as well. So it's been tricky. It's been a steep learning curve, but it's been a lot of fun. I've had a lot of fun with it. And so when the opportunity arose that we would not be having live concerts, and we said, wouldn't it be great to have a lot of music go up online? I took that camera and just started doing some simple arrangements. It started out as duets. I called it trombone duets 4 lips. So using 2 lips on each track with a duet, and that quickly expanded into 4 voices doing 4, all 4 parts stacked on 4 different tracks, and learning how to kind of line those up using really just a metronome, because I was doing it up in the recital hall. And after doing several of those, learning that just a metronome, just getting the time right, was really maybe half of the battle. I realized that when I came into trying to tune with myself, or when I listened back to it, I was not in tune with myself. Here I am playing the same person playing the same horn, and I'm not in tune with myself. And I realized when there's a fifth and it needs to be a little bit higher, I just hear that and I just play it a little bit higher. But if I can't hear the other parts, I don't know necessarily what partial of the chord I'm playing at any time. So that has evolved into the last couple of things I've been trying are down here, just sitting right at the iMac so that I can record a track and then actually listen to that back on the headphones as I'm playing the other 3 tracks, or whatever it ends up being. So that's working out a lot better. And so that's really what many of you may have tried some of the online apps like Acapella. There's one that's just audio that's called Band Lab that I have. And so really what you're doing there is it's helping you lay down a track, and then usually it's right on your phone or a tablet, and you just plug in and listen back to what you already have on the track or what somebody else has added on a track. And you can actually record yours while you're listening to the other tracks. So you could have one person lay down a piano or an organ track and then sing on top of that. And so a whole new world of possibilities is opening up now. It's just that I don't get to use the nice recital space upstairs. It's just I'm going to do it right down here where the iMac is. Just trying to save myself from investing in an iPad or anything else to make it more portable.
What software are you using on the iMac?
We're using Final Cut Pro. So that that gives us lots of opportunities for, on a lecture to lay out slides, the actual slides that you would see on a PowerPoint. We turn those into PDFs and you can pop those right in. The graphics that I make are just PNG graphics. So I'm using actually just a very cheap online photo editor. It's called PicMonkey. Very easy to use, very intuitive, and I can do slides. I can do lower thirds. If you're doing PNGs, you've got empty space. Even though you've got the rectangular shape of the video, you can do something just in the lower third, and it'll actually appear, below somebody's talking head or playing head. So that makes the lower thirds possible, which makes for a really nice presentation. And also Final Cut Pro has just a zillion different transitions, ways to blur in and out transitions or slide graphics across and join the different edited pieces together very nicely.
Erik, you want me to show one of your videos? I've got you queued up here in Facebook if you want to. I'm going to share my screen. Is there one in particular? I was looking at this one, the Holy Lord Trombone Quartet.
That'd be fine. That was an experiment.
Mm-hmm. So I'll let me see if I need to. Wait a minute. I'm not sure I've got the right.
It needs to be played very loudly.
Right. I was going to see if
11, everybody.
There's a way to with the sharing to use share my computer sound. So I just did that. Okay.
The experiment there was to see what would happen, how the mics and the editing would handle playing very loudly and a little bit closer to the microphone. So I wanted this a really big full sound, but I was still working with just a metronome there. So it still makes me cringe when I hear the chords that aren't quite in tune.
Definitely a process.
Yeah.
While I'm sharing my screen, I will go ahead and share the one that John recently did,
Yeah, this is
which
great.
is the Christian Hands, and then we'll go back to our gallery view. But let me see.
Christian hands in love we're watching, we're adorned with mask and glove. Social distance is required to proclaim the Savior's love. Learning to hand Skype and Morse code, sharing blogs and Twitter meets. Help us all to feel connected while we COVID quarantine. Separated yet united by faith in our risen Lord. May we learn God's grace and bounty, isn't ours to take and hoard. Whether it be food or favor, medicine or new vaccine, may we share what you provide us to survive COVID-19.
is just a masterpiece there.
So what software is that?
Okay, well, ours is a PC shop, so I use Adobe Premiere Pro and the whole suite of tools that we subscribe to. So that was synced up in Premiere, and of course I've done this sort of stuff for years, so explaining the process is kind of strange. Premiere actually has an auto sync tool for when you've done multiple camera shooting that will, using machine learning, will sync up the audio tracks based on the waveform. And that's basically what you're doing in the software when we've recorded all these separate pieces. And of course, professional recording is usually done in tracks this way, except you'll have a bed track and then the singers will come in and sing their parts, and you kind of get used to it, and it has a learning curve of its own to do studio recording. In the studio, we use, rather than a metronome, we use what's called a click track, which is a digital metronome that each singer is listening to in their headphones, and that's something that also most people aren't used to doing, so it has a learning curve to it. But in that case, that was done very hastily. We're so fortunate to have June Edwards in our congregation, who's been a very prolific and creative hymn writer. The downside is that she often thinks of these things at the last minute, and I have to scramble to get something done. And that's pretty easy when we have the choir meeting Thursday night and we can run through something she just wrote Thursday night to sing on Sunday. But in this case, I think I got the material Sunday, and then we had to create this for the next Sunday. So in that video, the piano is actually a MIDI file that I then cobbled up and sent out to everybody, asking them to sing along. And they were not working with a click track. They were just listening to the piano MIDI file in their headphones and singing along. And that is really hard to do. So Eric, like you experienced, when people are singing by themselves with no reference other than the instrumental track, we all have these little tendencies, and we'll throw in fermatas and we'll throw in little furbelows that take a little bit extra time. And then what happens when you put them all together is everybody's doing that differently. They can't hear each other. And so you start off with a giant mess, and then you have to edit it and get everything synced up and slice out bits that shouldn't have been there. And in some cases, you'd have to do a little auto tuning to bring someone up to pitch. But so it's not something that you just throw them all in a basket and it comes out magically. I think that one, I'm trying to think back. I think I worked on editing that for 2 hours to get it working at the level that it was. So, there's some work involved. It's much easier to get together in a room and do
Yes,
this
it is.
live. It is a massive amount of work to do this way. So, anyway, there are, as Eric mentioned, there's some free software that you can get that will do this, understanding that you're going to have to spend a lot of time working on it, and it has a learning curve. But Acapella is the one that I've heard of. I've never used it, but it runs on cell phones, and I think it runs on both iOS and Android. Why would I use that when I have a kind of suite of professional tools to use that I'm used to using? So, but there is some free software. Audacity is a wonderful free audio editor. You can't do everything that I can do in Audition, which is the Adobe version. Audition actually started off as Audacity, and then they developed it further. But you can do multi-track editing. You can see the waveform. Ruth, I just emailed you a screen grab. If you want to put it up, I figure that's easier than you're assigning me screen privileges. But I can show you the waveform so you can see, you know, what I was seeing on screen while working with those audio files. There you go. That's part of the screen. I have a triple screen layout in front of me, so this is one of the screens. But you can see there the waveforms that I was working with. The bottom one is the piano in green, the MIDI file. And then if you look at where the pauses are, you can see visually where everybody's pausing and where the phrases are. And so it's not really rocket science to get them lined up initially. The hard part is the imperfections and ironing out the imperfections. So that's where on a couple of the files you see a bunch of little slices where I had to take out frames and so on. But anyway, that gives you an idea of what it looks like. And you'd have a similar display in Audacity where you would see the waveform and you'd be able to nudge things around to line them up. And you can slice and delete little portions that ought to get taken out, and you know, to shorten overly held notes, and even to extend notes that were held too short. You know, I had a couple of occasions where I had to kind of expand somebody's note, but so I mean that gives you an initial idea how it's done. The one thing after doing a number of these, I really suggest is, I think what Erik was saying, that he records first at least one track and then plays listening to himself, which is, I think, how a cappella works. And that's in subsequent iterations of doing this. We're going to record the bed music track and then have the soprano, whoever's singing the soprano part, sing her or part, and then have everyone else listen to that and sing along. I may try adding a click track in to see if people can work with that, but that way the other parts are singing with somebody rather than just doing it all by themselves. Mm-hmm. And I think that presents a lot higher chance of everybody hitting the mark.
Getting there safe.
And one reason that really works well is that the soprano is the highest part, and when you have headphones on, well, maybe it's more my problem being a trombone player, but when I'm playing low, in the low mid-range of a trombone, and I'm trying to hear the low mid-range of another trombone in my ear, it's very hard. If I can do the soprano first, at least I've got something above that's gonna,
yeah,
you know, I'm gonna hear it in my ear a little bit better while I'm playing or singing.
Yeah, you know, even for professionals, it is very hard. I mean, I can tell you when I put the music tracks together, I can tell you right immediately who was able to sing with precision and who was singing with expression, because for this you need precision, not expression. And it's like everybody has to march the same way. But some people are able to do that, but even some pros have a really hard time not throwing in that little fermata here and there and whatever. So
yeah, we had really good, a pretty good success when Mary Ellen and I played. We laid down the first track together. So she played soprano, I played bass,
mm-hmm.
and we recorded that together so we could hear each other acoustically, and were recorded at the same time. And then I went back and did the alto and tenor lines, you know, listening back to that, and that works really well.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing about the Premiere, the software you're using, looks a lot like the Final Cut Pro screen. You can actually go back in if everybody's at different levels, or even if they're at the same level, you may want the soprano up a little bit, and you can actually drag
mm-hmm.
that one up a little bit. You can make different voices more prominent than others,
mm-hmm.
and balance it that way, which is nice.
The one issue there is if you do a couple of parts together, they're locked together, and
Right.
you cannot do those individually. And in a studio recording, we're going to try to record everybody separately so that we can tweak each part as separately as you go along. Yeah. So I don't know, any questions?
I was just gonna, we just got today something from Jeff Whitsitt with the Moravian Band, and the Moravian Band is going to call together all the players that would normally have played on Easter Sunrise Service to give them a chance to play 3 hymns together. In other words, record themselves individually and submit those tracks to, I think Mark Wright is going to be the central editor there. And he's going to try to put, so if 300 people respond, he's going to try to put all that down into an Easter sunrise service so that all the band players have a chance.
I'm glad I'm not doing that.
I really thought it was great, because here's some pointers and tips that they sent out, very detailed. So maybe we should share this with everybody that's interested in recording themselves, because it's things like sit or stand, so you're playing toward the camera, slightly to either side. Face a light source, like a window or lamp, to light up your face. If you're using a lyre, make sure you can see the camera so it can see you. I mean, just all these little things to think about. And at the end, it's like minimize your movements and noise between tunes. Don't talk to anyone. After the amen, wait about 10 seconds, then stop recording. Check your recording and then upload your recording. But it's a whole 2 pages full of little detailed instructions on how to do it.
Let me add a pet peeve. If you're filming yourself with a cell phone, hold it horizontally, not vertically. Look at the screen you're looking at. It's not vertical, it's horizontal, and it makes it very hard for us to chop you in if you've done the vertical thing, which most people do.
That one's on here.
Good, okay. Yeah. Ruth, I could actually email you the sheet that we're sending out to people if you would like, if folks would like it. And I don't know, but I'll send you a PDF of what we're.
Yeah, send me the PDF. I can actually load it into the chat box if people want to download it from there.
Right. But
speaking of Easter morning, I know in Raleigh Moravian Church, they had everybody go into a Zoom meeting for their Easter sunrise service. And so they had worked it out and had a rehearsal the week before, and each band member was given a tune. So each individual, instead of trying to play together on Zoom, they just individually played successive tunes. There were a couple of couples who were at home that could play their tune together in 2 parts. But otherwise, that was a really nice way to involve everybody without having to worry about the syncing and tuning and that kind of thing.
Sorry, let me get back up. I'm messing with email on the background. We didn't talk about it, but in case folks that are here don't know this, you can't do this sort of thing through Zoom or any other conferencing software because of the built-in latency or lag that it has going through the internet. And the lag varies person to person depending on how many hops your signal went through different servers. So I think it is literally impossible without doing some real magic somewhere to sync up something like Zoom exactly. Everybody, there's a lag with everybody. So
now you can use the original sound feature in Zoom if you want to feature like one musician. So,
right.
You know, so like for example, when we did the webinars for the readings, for the holy readings, Riddick played guitar and sang his version of "I Search for You, Lord" that he had rewritten as an Easter song. And what he did was there is in your audio settings, there is basically a turn on the option to use original sound. And so then you can sort of toggle that off and on in your meeting, and then your original sound can come through, and that's a little better audio quality. I mean, it's still not great by any measure, but it's a little it's certainly better than the other where they're trying to actually, the system is actually trying to sort of tamp down the audio. So.
Yeah, it's doing echo suppression and a whole bunch of other processing that makes it sound weird. Yeah.
Yeah, I know for Raleigh for Easter, they definitely did that. They all switched to original sound.
Mhm.
That worked well.
But I have a problem because my members don't have the Zoom Pro, so they don't have that feature. I think it has to be Zoom Pro and above to get the original sound. No?
No,
I think everybody should have that.
Okay, so they can all go into their preferences and name that. That's great to know.
it's buried somewhere in the preferences. I
Yeah.
haven't looked at it in a little while, but
Okay.
you
Thank
have to look for it.
Okay.
Yeah, it's in the advanced audio settings, and it just says show in meeting option to enable original
Right.
sound. And really,
Right, I
that's
recently
really
did it.
only
I
for the
just-
musician. I mean, only the musician really needs to enable
Exactly.
their original
But
sound.
I didn't
Everybody
know
needs
that
to
could be used
notice
even
a
on the
difference
free
in the
Zoom.
audio.
So that's great.
Mhm. Lois, you're muted.
Here I am. Is that better?
Much better.
Sorry about that. Do you have any tips for getting good quality sound from either piano or organ while I'm recording?
Yeah. Where you're recording in the sanctuary or in your home?
Yes, some of each.
Okay. Well, with organ in particular, you don't want the microphone too close to the pipes or the speakers,
Okay.
because you want to have the room reverb. So you want to have some distance, which is the opposite of what you do with recording people or individual instruments usually. There
Okay.
you want it as close as possible, but you need to have it out and record the ambiance of the room and the reverb. That's a little less so with piano, but so piano you may want to get it closer, but organ is integrally part of the room.
Right.
So
I'm not an audio technician, but I've seen a lot of audio technicians, and they seem to always mic a baby grand or a grand with the microphone under the soundboard.
mhm.
I've seen that a lot.
Really?
And if with an upright piano, it's kind of at the back of the upright.
And what kind of a microphone can I use? Because I'm recording on my iPad. It's not going to make a very good picture if I record from under the piano. But can I just extend a microphone with a cord to record?
There are external mics you can get.
Yeah. I would say if you're recording with an iPad, just get the iPad in a good vicinity of the piano, not really far away. And you know, you can get plug in extra mics, you can get radio mics and so on. They're not, the good ones aren't cheap, but you know, there are mics specifically for doing that sort of stuff.
Right.
Becky,
So I'm just
Becky
moving to
Lepore- Sorry, Becky Lepore at Central Moravian in Bethlehem has been recording one piece every day since the social distancing began. And I think she just uses, it's either a phone or a pad just by itself. Maybe
Yeah, she uses her phone.
from the piano, something like that, over to the side.
She's been using her phone.
I just wanted to share, Michael Westmoreland, our organist, is also on, and my daughter recorded him playing the organ from the front of the sanctuary. We have a balcony organ on her iPad with just a cheap extension microphone. And I don't know, Michael, maybe you could, but I thought the sound was really good when we played it and we shared it during our Holy Week.
Well, I can't vouch for the playing being that good, but no, I think like John was saying, where you put the microphone is the biggest thing. I mean, a decent recorder, and you have to remember, at least for our uses, everybody's watching our services or our interactions either through Zoom, on a laptop, or on their phone. So it doesn't matter how, I mean, you don't have to have a really high quality recorder when you're playing through computer speakers anyway. And for regular kind of our church purposes, as long as it's a good clean recording, I'm on the just find a good location for balance train more than worrying about how high tech the equipment is. But our purposes are very particular.
That makes sense. The one thing that I've noticed is that, and maybe it's my iPad, the high notes come through really well on the organ and the low notes not so much. So I have to change the registration so I can get a normal sound.
Yeah, I had the benefit of, as Margaret was saying, her daughter Corinne was sitting down at the front of the church. So we didn't spend a lot of time on it. We just wanted to get some hymns, that we could use for Holy Week. And I tried out a couple of different stops, found some things that, stayed away from mixtures and reeds. And just once again, for what I was trying to do, it was somewhat vanilla, but it gave us the best recording, and I kind of just stuck with it. But I had the benefit of being able to let Corinne play me back, different samples until I found what I liked. It was trial and error, but once I got a sense of that, then I just kind of stuck with it. But I agree with you that once again, all of that I think isn't going to matter much about the quality of your recording. It's more of a function of the organ sounds and that kind of thing, and the limitations of the speakers you're listening to.
So I have a question. We've been doing Zoom out of my home and just using recorded music, but I'm thinking of trying it at the sanctuary and seeing if the piano live comes through when I use the original sound feature. Do any of you have experience with that? Will that work?
It should. I haven't actually tried it using the equipment you're using. Are you just doing this from a cell phone or from
my laptop?
Laptop, yeah. It should work. It's not going to be high fidelity, but it's my standards have plummeted down into the.
Yes, I know what you're saying. Well, and if she can learn on her iPad to change the allow original sound, then she might be able to play. Before, when she played from her home, it wasn't a solid tone. That's what we're trying to get a way to get to our own music, and so we don't have to keep borrowing music for worship.
Well, what you're talking about is the compression that is going on. Where they're trying to squelch down stuff and prevent echoes and so on, and it does a terrible thing for music. So the original sound should help you a lot with that. The other thing is, I'm assuming, this isn't something I've looked into, but I'm assuming that most of the phones and tablets have had all the recording software idealized for human voice, and there's a whole set of things we do to process human voice that it just doesn't work very well for instruments because they have a wider range. And so I think, Lois, when you're talking about not getting the low notes right, I think there's a low cut filter in there that's intentionally cutting out, so it eliminates hum, but that's not really good for the pipe organ. So, yeah.
Thank you.
We did some early recordings at my church. Mike Reese came in, we did some hymns, and the pedal is almost non-existent.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't have a huge pedal division anyway, but it's, I should have added more.
Yeah, that's the low cut filter, and adding more may not do anything. I think most of the time on a cell phone, they just cut that out, because your vocal range doesn't go down anywhere. I'm forgetting the cutoff, but it's somewhere in the high hundreds hertz, and so they're just going to turn off everything below that, and that makes a big difference on the pedal sound.
And even on even on a higher quality microphone, you've got a condenser. I mean, it's still going to, a condenser microphone is still going to take out something there in the
Right, that was actually Mike Reese, and
Yeah,
so
you better-
he
you
brought
better
an
use a better
audio
microphone to
device.
tell you're losing them. Yeah.
So,
I have a question. So I'm actually leaning, Margaret can chime in too. Let me just explain. The format of what we're doing at Freeze for Worship is different than, for instance, what we're doing at New Philadelphia. New Philadelphia, we have a small group and we stream it live, and I have nothing to do with the sound. I mean, I don't even know how that goes. I don't watch it. I don't want to hear myself. But what we do at Freeze is different. And we had, like we did it this past Sunday at 5 o'clock on Sunday evening, Zoom meeting basically for worship. And we have an order of worship and everybody logs in, and we kind of trade off taking turns reading liturgy responsively, reading the scripture, a meditation, all that sort of stuff. And we're looking at putting some music into that. For instance, this Sunday, of course, the lectionary, Jesus Makes My Heart Rejoice, goes really well. Having talked about it with Margaret and some other people, though, recording myself playing it on the organ or the piano, or it doesn't really get across what we're trying to do, which is to have a hymn presentation. So what I would kind of like to do is maybe go through recordings and stuff that we've already had professionally recorded through the Music Foundation, things like that. So my question is, thoughts about doing that. I don't know the copyright issues about doing it on a Zoom. It's not for public consumption. It would be for a private Zoom meeting. And also where to go for those resources. I know we've got some digitized already, but just, are there thoughts about going about that method? Because I think people would rather listen to the hymns being sung to them than just trying to follow along with instrumental music. With the majority of people that are worshiping are not choir singers and barely sing anyway. They mostly listen to the choir. So just what are your thoughts about that? I just feel like for our purposes, well done recordings of Moramis or whoever, doing some familiar Moravian hymns would be more appreciated by our congregation that's viewing. What do we need to go through to use those things the right way? Just what are your thoughts?
I think one of the problems with singing at home is you hear only your own voice, and that's
Right.
pretty frustrating for some people. I'll let Gwen take that one.
okay. They're there. They are there. Rejoice. So I think if you go to moravian.org, and I think probably this is also on the BCM website. I know it's on ours as well, the Music Foundation website. There's a space. You can go to COVID-19 resources space, and under that there are a list of hymns and also liturgies. And links to files for those, links
Perfect.
to audio files. MP3
Okay, good.
files.
I didn't see the audio files. I'll go back. I used for our worship this Sunday, I think a resource from where you're talking about it was the one based on the Lord's Prayer. And I put it, I shared my screen and did like a keynote presentation or whatever. So we had 2 readers reading responsively, but everybody could follow the liturgy text in the Zoom, and that worked really well. And so I'll go back to that resource and look for the music files. That's very beneficial if I can find that there.
There should be a PDF of the text as well as an MP3 file. And I will tell you that we are actually in the process of recording more of the hymns from the Book of Worship. So
yeah, that would be a huge,
many more
for our purpose. That's exactly what we need. I mean, I do play some stuff, and for prelude music and things, that's okay. But for individual worship, I think good singers recorded well with the words is more what we need. So
I have to tell you, I need to send Mike Reese a present or something, or at least I owe him an email thanking him for doing the Holy Week readings, which ended up being a much better idea than anybody knew, because there is no way I could have done Holy Week as well as we did without the music recordings on that, because I had a kit right there to pull very well done music, and it was very effective, I think. And that's what you're talking about, is using nicely done, well sung, well played Moravian hymns.
That's right.
Now, I'll tell you what we've been doing at Trinity. I said my standards have kind of gone way down since we got into this situation, because it's, you have to deal with reality. So I'm accepting, Zoom video files that in normal times I would have just never used. But and we're going back. We have almost every service recorded for the last 20 years at Trinity, and I'm able to go back in our records and actually look through hymns, or look through the old bulletins and find hymns and find the CD and get a recording of Trinity singing that hymn 10 years ago. And the audio, I'm not happy with the audio quality, but it's our congregation, we own the copyright, there aren't any questions about it. And so it works.
Well, and I'll tell you, at Unity, we have a really nice choir, and our Dennis Fort is our choir director, and he had gotten into the habit over the last year or so of just recording at rehearsals the last try of the anthem. And we're now going to be using a couple of those recordings, in the worship, because they're great, and we can't reproduce the 24-person choir right now.
Yeah, not right now. Yeah. So, and unfortunately, if we had known in advance that this was going to happen, we could have all been doing that. But, and the elderly gentleman that takes the audio file and burns a CD for us every week, I called him up and told him, you didn't know that your work was going to pay off, but here it is. I'm going back 8 and 10 years and pulling from the CD that you created. So thanks.
I was going to say, Michael, one other thing about Mike Reese's resources is, even if you don't find what you need on Moravian.org, if you email him and just say, I'm looking for this, he has a lot of more stuff than what he's got out there.
I'll be in touch with Mike. Like I said, I was fortunate to find the liturgies that were available, which was very helpful. And I guess I just didn't look hard enough to find the audio, or didn't think to look for it there. But honestly, where we are now planning stuff, if it's out there, we'll build what we're doing around that. It's just nice to have access to some stuff. Yeah. We, for our Good Friday Tenebrae, Margaret Couch and her daughter Corinne worked really hard with us to put together kind of a lessons and carols. It was cool. We had live readers read our scripture, and then we played recordings of music. And it was a mixture, and we'd gone back to some of our own recordings, which was nice, but we just didn't have the recording technology. The sound quality is just not that good. And so I think it's nice to plug in something. Hey, this is our choir. It's not what we sound like in person, hopefully. But this is something we sing every year. It's familiar. Yeah. But largely I'd like to supplement with better recordings. I think it's just less distracting. So I appreciate that. That was the most useful thing for this, for what I'm looking to do. So I appreciate that. And I will reach out to Mike.
Mike, another suggestion, not for Moravian stuff, but for general church stuff. A number of denominations are making music files available of kind of universal hymns. And I was just looking for the email and I can't find it right now. If I do find it, I'll send it to you. I think the Presbyterian Church has a resource of a whole bunch of common hymns recorded that you can, and with copyright permission.
Perfect. Yeah.
And so I'm sure if you go Google that, carefully, you'll probably find those resources. But everybody's in the same boat and has the same needs right now. So people are doing things that they never would have done 6 months ago.
The United Methodist Church also has piano recordings of their hymnal. Mm-hmm. Most of the hymns anyway, but they don't have the vocal with it. So that's what I have trouble with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Other questions about music, about producing music, about worship?
I'm just going to chime in and say, I know this isn't necessarily the forum for that, but just keep copyright restrictions in mind. So, public domain, and with things in the MBW, and also Sing to the Lord a New Song, Singing from the Heart, anything that carries an IBOC and MMF copyright, you may use those.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so just keep those things in mind.
Thanks for that reminder, Gwen.
Yes, that's important. I'm
Sorry,
gonna
my copyright hat.
have this is editorial comment. At Trinity, we've had the CCLI license for quite a few years and the streaming license. And one license, which I needed to pick up some songs from, and I found they have quite a lot of stuff that's very good, not the same as CCLI. But one license went out of their way to extend a free license to all churches during this crisis. And CCLI did not make any effort in that regard. And I remember things like that. And we're switching to one license partially as a result of that.
John, I also noticed this morning that one license is now offering a kind of a limited time podcast license. So for those congregations that maybe don't already possess one, this is, I think, good for April and May at least.
Yeah, John, we're changing to one license primarily because it covers a lot more than CCLI does.
Well, CCLI is much more contemporary worship,
right.
band up front music. And one license has a lot of more choral and traditional, what I call kind of traditional stuff. So yeah, I hadn't even actually looked at it until recently, but I think one license is going to be better for us. But I really pay attention to business practices, and I was happy with what one license did and very unhappy with CCLI. Editorial off.
If I can just say a word about anybody that's creating music videos that you'd like to have posted on Moravian Music Foundation, Facebook, website, that kind of anything we can share, I'd love for you to send it to me because I can't always find or be notified of new things that pop up. So feel free to email those directly to us, either at info@moravianmusic.org or Erik, E-R-I-K, @moravianmusic.org would be great.
Hey, everybody.
Hello, who's this?
This is Russ Williams at New Beginnings.
Hey, Russ.
Hey, John. I thought about calling John on his cell phone, but then I thought, well, he's going to be on here. And what I had to ask John might be helpful for everyone who's participating. And I'm sorry that I'm just now joining. I could not get my Zoom to work, but so forgive me if I'm asking a question that's already been addressed. And it doesn't have to relate to music, but it does have to relate to streaming services online. Our board just recently decided that we are going to continue live streaming even when we are able to get back together and the restrictions are lifted. And that was announced to the congregation via our live stream this past Sunday. Sunday at 1:00 in the afternoon, I got a rather lengthy email from a parent who was not happy that we were going to be live streaming our worship services even after we got back together for privacy reasons, the intimacy reasons, the sacredness of the sanctuary, et cetera, et cetera. I have just crafted an email. I have not hit the send button. And I won't hit the send button until after I kind of gain some insight from you, John, about maybe how you would address that.
So you want me under the bus with you?
I won't quote anything you say on this email.
Yeah, that's there's some real issues there. You do need to let everyone know that you are transmitting the service, that you're streaming the service. The issue with children has become more and more prominent recently. We're streaming our whole service, and everybody knows that's the deal, and the parents know that if their kids come up, they're going to be on the live stream. And so in part, I think it's that everyone's informed that that's what's going on. And I have run into this particular reaction, and particularly for your church and for Trinity as well. I'm paying a lot of attention to what's going on now. And I think that we are in an enormous opportunity where the church is being forced to jump 5 years into the future. And Carrie Neuhoff, who's one of the church consultants I pay attention to, said that most pastors are going to be ready to step into the past the minute they can step back into the building. And I really think that that is not the way to go. We are reaching about 250% of our normal attendance right now of people who watch the entire service. It's an edge of growth and outreach that is how things are going to work from now on. And so I think you're doing the right thing. Now, you may have to make some accommodations for people who have concerns, and her child may need to not come up front, and you may need to define where the cameras are pointed. When we, and I hope this isn't rambling, when we videotape crowds, we will usually make an announcement that this corner over here will be off camera. So people that are just super sensitive, or maybe in the witness protection program, you don't know, can go sit over there. And then we have to be faithful and not point a camera to that corner. So it's a sensitive issue for some people, and sometimes there's baggage that you don't know what's going into it. So I'm going to have you on my prayer list, buddy.
Well, basically the gist of my response to this concerned parent was to mention those advantages that you mentioned, but also not to discredit her concerns about the privacy, and hopefully share some detail. I mean, this past Sunday, I was kind of limited to how much time I could explain what we were doing, but the camera that we have prepared or planned to have it stationed to where only the front of the sanctuary will be shown. That's where the children's chat happens, unfortunately, and her 3 children are very active in the church and come forward every Sunday. But we'll get through that. But we also talked about kind of privatizing our services, making the YouTube video private, and you can only access it if a link sent to you by our secretary. And then maybe, every once in a while, when there's nothing, personal per se in the service, we could make it public for people to, see what our services look like. Maybe on a recurring basis once a month. Those are just some thoughts.
Well, that's you can do that. This gets over into the issue that we've had recently with Zoom, where in the spirit of openness, the Moravian Church Without Walls wanted to go ahead and post the link anywhere and everywhere and allow anybody to come in. I don't know if they've had any Zoom bombing, but there are a bunch of churches that have had serious Zoom bombing incidents where people came in and were very aggressively evil. So, you know, there are issues here that we need to be aware of. I made it a policy that we do not publish Zoom links other than privately through email. But what you're talking about, though, and this is a separate issue, limits you in terms of how you can use the services for outreach. So it depends on this whole question of is the church just for us or is it for everyone?
That was in my response. Okay, you affirmed that part.
The thing that my church does, the church that I serve, we record a service and then we put it up just on Sunday morning from 10:30 to 1 o'clock. So people participate kind of at the same time, but then it comes down again. And we encourage our congregation, we send the link to everybody and encourage them to invite their friends. I think our reach is more than we've been getting in Sunday attendance. But it doesn't open it up to everybody.
Now, is it available after 1 o'clock or just between those?
No, it's only available for those 2.5 hours on Sunday morning. So it's not, we always put the pastor's sermon up on the Facebook page, but the rest of the service just goes away.
I think that's what Home Moravian has been doing because of copyright concerns, that they live stream the entire service, but then only the sermon is up on the website for viewing later.
That's right.
Yeah, and I was gonna mention, John, in response to your asking about Moravian Church Without Walls, they use a webinar feature for their worship, and that's really different in terms of the Zoom security because it's basically locked down. You know, no one but the specific panelists can even access their video or their sound. So, so that has a whole different set of security, you know, I mean, protocols, and it really is a pretty secure setting, but it's expensive.
I have just one question that also goes to that licensing question that came up was when you talk about the CCLI and when license or whatever, are you doing license for general use of copyrighted materials? What is, just explain that to me, because I think there is a portion, well, there is a contingency in our church that might like to stream our services after we get back. So that's a question. You address that.
The basic licensing of, and there are several agencies, the biggest one is CCLI. One license is, I think, second largest. There's some others. The basic function is to allow you to reprint the lyrics of a copyrighted hymn or piece in your bulletin or squirted up on your screen during a service. And that's what the basic license allows you to do. None of the basic licenses allow you to stream the end result. So you have to buy an add-on license for web streaming. That one's not very expensive. I don't know, it's $35 a year or something. But it is a separate license. And basically it allows you to print copies of the hymn lyrics for your congregation. And actually, there is an aspect of copyright law that allows a church to perform or to sing any piece, regardless of copyright, during their service. But the copyright part is you cannot reproduce the words in the bulletin. So they would all have to know it by heart to do it legally. So that's what you're licensing.
Can I ask a question, John? Does, once again, back to what we're doing, does that change at all, whether you're doing kind of a closed invitation only Zoom function as opposed to streaming live on the web, or is it all basically the same thing?
It's all the same thing. This got adjudicated with the VHS and DVD licensing issue of, is it home use versus public use? And as soon as it's not your home and your family, you're doing a public performance. And yeah, so if it's unrelated people, you got to buy a public performance kind of license.
But just to clarify that, I think your licenses are only for worship services and not for a performance. Like if you had a concert,
Yes, yes.
putting on an actual concert, that would not be covered under the same license.
Right.
Yeah, there's another group that will license performances. CCS will do that. They've got a deal with ASCAP, BMI, SIGA that they'll license most performances, no matter where it is and so forth. But then again, it doesn't have the streaming and others. You know, it's you can't get everything at one place, and the licenses that I've looked at are all dependent on attendance pricing. You know, so the bigger the church, the more you pay.
Yeah.
And it's based on attendance rather than membership, rather than church membership.
Correct, attendance, yeah.
And I think when, just to further elaborate, John, you said the church needs to have the basic license first, and then they add on the streaming license.
Correct.
Yeah, you can't.
At this point, you can't buy just the streaming
No, you
license.
can't buy just the streaming license. It's an add-on to the basic license. Yeah.
But it's really inexpensive. What I always tell people is people say they can't afford, their congregations can't afford it, and I always say you can't afford not to have it.
Yeah, what is it, $150,000 per occurrence?
Yeah, probably minimal.
Yeah, at least. Yeah.
Now, most of the time that's not going to happen in the real world, but they can certainly come in and nail you with fines pretty easily. And of course, if one of the companies gets you in their website or in their sites, you can't afford the legal fees to start with, even if you win the case. So it's not worth going there, because for most churches we're talking about $200 or $300 a year, and most churches, even small churches, waste that much on insignificant things anyway.
Well, we're after 2 o'clock, so I want to be a good steward of your time, but I want to thank John and Erik especially for coming and sharing some of their wisdom and expertise with us today, and thank you all for being here.